Hello, my name is Spencer and I like to craft, paint, and build things to escape reality for a bit. Over the past month, I have not had a ton of time to hobby. So that means I'll fall back on my old reliable painting up a ship from the tabletop board game Star Wars Armada. This is an Imperial Raider Corvette introduced in the worst version of the Star Wars Battlefront 2 video game. And this is the Corvus, a specific Imperial frigate. Star Wars Battlefront 2 has many problems and was not a perfect game, but I think the plot of the story missions of the game are incredibly underrated. While I prime the ship black, I'll tell you a little bit of the story of the Corvus. In Battlefront 2, you follow an Imperial Special Forces unit called Inferno Squadron from the Battle of Endor into after Episode 6. Over time, the main character in the squadron realizes that the Empire and what it's come to be is inherently flawed, and they end up defecting to the Rebel Alliance. Next, I hit the hull of the ship with an airbrushing of white-gray from Vallejo. Inferno Squadron takes their ship, the Corvus, into the Rebel Alliance. In the Battlefront 2 DLC, we can see that once we hit the age of the New Republic, a lot of the Corvus has been retrofitted, removing some of the solar panels on the side and replacing the engines. For some visual variety, I went in and picked out a bunch of small panels, guns, and ports to paint a darker gray color. For this, I used Pro Acryl's Warm Gray. I can't really say what makes me like the Corvus specifically in all of Star Wars, but I do think it's about the right size of ship that I kind of daydream about in my everyday life about being part of the crew of. For all of the red markings across the ship, I used Vallejo's Scarlet Blood color. It does also help that the Corvus is a really cool design of a ship with a really interesting supporting crew from the game. And even in the game, Iden Versio and Del Mico had some really stellar scenes and plot lines where it talked about defecting from the Empire because you knew it was the right thing to do morally. And then Battlefront 2 has potentially the best Luke Skywalker scene that I've ever seen in Star Wars, which Inferno was an important plot point for it as well. I also got the opportunity to practice my edge highlighting into a trim on the side of the ship. Overall, I think the Corvus is just one of my hot take Star Wars ships. I do think a lot of Star Wars is overhated by the fan base and overhyped as well for no real reason, so I always like to point out the highlights wherever I can, such as cool characters, cool ships, cool designs, cool plots. Even though I don't want to understate this, EA's Battlefront 2 was not a good game, and I just think the story deserves more props. My perfectionism got the best of me, and I decided I didn't like how many of the panels I had marked up, nor some of the red markings. So I went back in with the Vallejo white gray to clean up the ship a bit. I decided to practice my freehanding a little bit more, given the fact that the red markings on the wings of the Corvus are actually fairly manageable polygons. However, I am nowhere near an expert on this, and it was a little bit of trial and error and practice to get a favorable result. Speaking of trial and error, I want to make a quick note that my process isn't perfect. I think a lot of YouTube highly edits their videos. I tinkered around with this process a lot, and I made a lot of mistakes along the way. I tried a bunch of different shades of gray that didn't match. I tried a bunch of different techniques to bring out the details, but ultimately, it's just trial and error to get a product I'm happy with. I then decided I needed a little bit more color variety, so I went in with a Vallejo light gray to pick out very few panels on the ship's front. To really bring out the recessed details, I then coated the entirety of the hull of the ship in a thinned down black wash. I thinned this down with about 1 to 4 with Army Painter Speed Paint Medium. The final part of the ship that needed to be painted were the engines. I started by coating each engine with the warm gray and then putting a puddle of bold titanium white from Pro Acryl into each of the engine bases. Once dry, I then put a drop of Vallejo's Sun Yellow on top of the white. I stacked the colors like this to bring out the vibrancy of the engine colors to really make them stand out. To finish up the engines, I put a dollop of Vallejo's fluorescent orange on top of the yellow to really get that final impressive pop. Since we will be playing with this on the tabletop, I will take it outside for a matte varnish, and then we can move on to some glamour shots. For those of you who made it to the end, thank you. This hobby provided me with a much needed escape from life. For me, sharing these tiny nerded projects with you means the world to me, and if you'd like to see more of my projects, please feel free to leave a like and subscribe. I'll be back soon with another build, but until then, take care, and I hope you all have an excellent week. I'll see you around.